Joining me right now is Mike Flynn, an 18th Congressional District candidate, a Republican. Tell us a little bit about yourself for those of us who don't know, who aren't familiar with you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Born and raised in Quincy, Illinois. My family moved there in 1870, started a family business, a bottling company. We became Coca-Cola bottlers. Never run for political office before, never intended to run for political office.
But you've been around politics. You've been in D.C., Springfield, and in the news even.
Yeah, the last 7 years in media. I've spent most of my career in policy development, working for an advancing government reform, reform of government. The last 7 years in media because I realized that a lot of our political decisions are really debated and won and lost in the media. And that's where I've been in the space trying to advance a lot of reforms. And when this vacancy opened up and I saw that we were just kind of going down the road of the politics as usual, being from here and this being my home, I felt we needed finally to break from this kind of politics and business as usual and really chart new, stronger territory.
Well, give me and give our viewers out there your elevator pitch for why you're the man to take the helm in Washington.
Yeah, well, you know, I've been around policy for a long time. I know the issues, I know the policies, I know the media and how media really impacts our policy decisions, but I'm not a politician. It's not a career for me. I haven't spent my entire life trying to get into political office or elected office. I come from a background of businessmen. I worked in our family business for over a decade, a family of farmers. It is an experience. You know, for years, the government's been out of touch with us, and increasingly our politicians and elected officials are out of touch with us. And it's because they don't live the lives we live or walk the streets we walk.
Do you think that's one of the reasons that maybe Aaron Schock got caught up in
I think it's a
what he did?
I think it's a parable. I think it is what happens, that when you look at politics as a career, when it is your life's vocation, it changes your incentives, it changes your outlook. And I think we've had that for very, very much too long.
How much of that has to do with money?
It's money, it's power, it's a desire to be in Washington. It's an unfamiliarity with how we live. You know, in 8 of the 10 richest counties in this country are in the Washington, D.C. metro area now. There's no recession there, and there never was. And they live totally separate lives.
So how do you change that? How do you become relatable? Because at a certain point, if you're in elected office, you are kind of put on a pedestal.
Yeah, but it's a pedestal I don't want to be on. And that's a critical difference, is that when you are aspiring and trying to be in office, you want to be on that pedestal. I've been in Washington. That actually, I think, works to my advantage because I've seen Washington. There's nothing there to wow me. There's no stars in my eyes when I go there. I've actually probably become more conservative the longer I've been in Washington. But we've got, the way you change is you change who you send to represent us. Mm-hmm. For too long, we have let almost this entirely separate species go and represent us in Washington.
So how do you change Washington then? I mean, because obviously there's a history that's built to this point, so it's evolved like anything else does. But,
well, yeah, no, it's right. I mean, first, obviously you change the kind of people you send there. You've got to change, you know, I will not serve more than 8 years because if I serve longer than that, I would qualify for a congressional pension. And that's an absurd idea, that there's a pension for Congress. I think you've got to get rid of things like that. You've got to get rid of the benefits and the financial benefits of being a congressman so that people do not spend their lives trying to get there. And you make that change, when you change the incentives, you'll change the institution profoundly.
Is there really a way to change that, though, given the money in politics, given the way districts are drawn, mm-hmm. And term limits? I know term limits is something that you discuss a little bit on.
Yeah, I support term limits. I used to not support term limits, but I support them now, having seen Washington. I think the institution is so corrupted, and the advantages for certain people of being in Washington is too much. You've got to, but term limits alone doesn't solve it. You know, if you serve 10 years as a state rep and 10 years as a state senator and 10 years as a congressman, I mean, you've done term limits, but you're still a lifelong politician. I do think getting rid of things like the congressional pension, cutting the pay, cutting a lot of the money in campaigns is because government does so much. If you had tax reform, comprehensive tax reform and a flat tax, you would wipe out a lot of the lobbyists in K Street. Most of the money in politics is because government's doing so much. And as you do less, there will be less money flowing into politics.
Now, the most recent past head of the Ways and Means Committee, Dave Camp, a Republican congressman from Michigan, he was doing some work to try to reform the tax code, but he's gone now. So that's, and even Carl Levin in the Senate was looking at corporate taxation.
We have to. I mean, it has to be the #1 priority.
But isn't that a problem, though, that both of those guys are gone now? They were doing all the hard work, and now you have some new people.
And part of the problem you have with tax reform is that everybody has their exemptions, deductions, and credits that they want to keep. And when you keep those, you can't have the rate as low as it should be, and it makes it complicated. One way out of that, and this is why we have to think differently, is Hong Kong had a policy where they gave the taxpayer the choice. They said, you can use the existing code with the credits and exemptions you want, or you can use this flat tax code, and you don't get those. Within a year, everybody had shifted to the flat tax, just because it was simpler and easier. You can't get that through the existing system. But if you give the taxpayer a choice, and that's been done before, that's been tried before, and I think we have to start thinking outside the box and doing these things, even borrowing from other countries, ways that move us forward.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot now for a few policy questions.
Yeah, shoot 'em.
Because some big issues. Obviously, race in America right now is a major topic given what happened in Charleston. What can be done? For example, they're talking about getting rid of the Confederate flag. I mean, is that something that's a step in the right direction, or do we need to really start from somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that people in South Carolina or Georgia or Mississippi are going to have to decide. I mean, I'm not going to comment on that. I would not support having that there, but that's their decision. But those things, those aren't really the discussion. A lot of our discussion on race is a media-driven narrative. It is, they intentionally bring these up to try to make division between us. Several years ago, Andrew Breitbart and I took on the activist group Acorn and exposed their hypocrisy. But one of the really evil things about Acorn is that part of their training manual was to go into communities, find past examples of racial hatred, and remind people of that every day.
Obamacare.
And I think Obamacare has to be gone. It has to be repealed. It has to be taken out because it'll get worse every year it's on the books.
What about the millions of people who are benefiting from having insurance? Well, many of them for the first time.
Yeah, well, there's other ways they can benefit. You've got to bring the consumer into the center of the healthcare system. Right now, all we're doing is we're debating who's paying for healthcare, but we're not actually discussing that patient-doctor relationship. And that should be the foundation of healthcare system. The Obamacare moves us in the wrong direction, and it will get far worse in the coming years.
Another issue that's before the Supreme Court that we're going to hear about soon, gay marriage.
Yeah, gay marriage, the federal government is likely to find that governments have to recognize gay marriage, but the question is, marriage is a religious institution, and the debate will be about whether religions have to recognize it, and religious people have to recognize it. The fight for religious liberty is going to be one of the central fights of the coming few years, and I think we have to absolutely protect the freedom and the dignity of religious people to not participate in gay services or gay marriage or perform gay services.
Terrorism, ISIS, more boots on the ground in the Middle East?
ISIS is a medieval death cult. It has to be eradicated. The way we're doing it now is the worst of all worlds. We bomb them a little bit, just enough to get the propaganda victory, but not enough to kill them. I think we absolutely have to kill them. We're going to have to destroy them at some point. We either do it now with very few troops, or we do it in 5 years with the Fourth Army. One of the two is going to have to happen.
Now, one last issue I want to talk about is guns. You call it a natural right, but is it too easy for some of the most dangerous people in America to get their hands on guns?
I don't believe that's true. I mean, in the latest examples we've had, these were not people that would have been banned from owning guns because of a criminal history. It is a fundamental right. The Constitution and the government does not give us a right to own handguns. We have that right. I think you've got to look. I mean, there's going to be violence in a city, in a country of 300 million people. You've got to look at the mental health system, which is a travesty in this country. And you've got to look at things like that before you just always rush to guns. The fact that a gun is used in a crime has nothing to do with the fundamental right to gun ownership.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I wish we had more time.
All right, thanks,
Mike
Paul.
Flynn is a candidate for the 18th District Congressional seat in Illinois. He is a Republican. If people want to find out a little bit more about you.
Yeah, MikeFlynnForCongress.com, and on Facebook, Mike Flynn for Congress.
All right. Well, thank you very
Great.
much.
Thanks a lot, Paul.